Hey, what's up guys? My name is Cherno. Welcome back to my game engine series. So last time we extended our scriptable entity component. We just talked about a better way potentially to do scriptable entities. I know that's still a hot topic. It's a hot debate. Check out that video if you haven't already. We're going to move away a little bit from all the scriptable entity stuff because for now we have native script component. We have a way to actually script our entities natively, and at the moment, obviously, we're working towards kind of like a minimum viable product just to get everything up and running so that you can actually start creating scenes and making games within Hazel. So that part I'm marking is pretty much done for now because it does what it needs to do. And we're going to move on to actually doing some fun stuff today, hopefully, where we're going to take a look at, and I need to hide chat. We're going to take a look at the scene hierarchy panel today, essentially. So what the scene hierarchy panel is, and this is kind of the next step in what we're doing. I think I will make potentially next game engine series video. I want to make a little bit of like a roadmap planning video just to basically publish some sort of online roadmap that you know will contain information about what it is we're working towards, just so that it's a little bit more clear, both for me, but also for everyone watching, because I think it's really important to make sure that your plan is solid and that you're going to stick to that plan. Otherwise, again, making a game engine very difficult, very arbitrary, and it's you know, it's going to wind up being super annoying when you forget what you're supposed to be working on. So definitely going to do something like that next time. But essentially what we've kind of decided to do here, and I think it's a reasonable decision, is we want to construct this, we want to basically make it so that you can make something in Hazel, right? The 2D workflow is something that we've been prioritizing for a while. So I've arbitrarily picked a game and we're going to work towards implementing all the features to make that happen. So in other words, you know, I think last time with this whole situation, and let me just make sure that this does look correct. So we can move the camera, obviously, and you know, we have the ability to add some native scripts now. The next step really is I want to be able to construct some sort of scene using Hazelnut. Hazelnut is supposed to be kind of like a level editor. So in order to actually, you know, for it to actually function as a level editor, I want to be able to, you know, make entities, maybe add like a sprite component to them, maybe set that to a solid color or to a texture, position it in my world and just, you know, navigate my world, maybe using some kind of editor camera. I want to be able to do all of that stuff so that I can essentially construct a scene. Once we have a scene constructed, and you can actually manipulate entities and add new entities, add components to those entities, maybe add native script components to those entities as well, then we now have a way to actually make a scene, and then we'll work towards maybe making like a play button or something that we can click that will actually transition into our scene's runtime so that we can actually play our game. And then, you know, we'll talk about that whole process as well, because that's going to be quite involved. And then we can also, you know, do other stuff revolving the editor and scenes and stuff like that, such as serialization. So we want to be able to obviously save our work instead of just hitting close and then everything disappears. That's not what we want. And also potentially even running the game standalone outside of the editor. So that kind of bubble of work is what we're going to be working towards, and we're going to be approaching it from like a, you know, minimum viable product, MVP, kind of vertical slice situation, which is basically fancy talk for like, you know, let's just do all of the low-hanging fruit. Let's just do everything the easy kind of fast way, but also not, you know, still reasonable way, right? Just to get it up and running. What's the minimum viable like solution we have here for this to be usable? Let's start there, and then we'll start refining it and iterating over it. So that's what we're going to be doing here. So today I thought that it would be a good idea to start by creating a new panel. And this is going to be our scene hierarchy panel. This is going to be essentially containing the hierarchy of our scene. We're going to be able to see all of the entities in our scene here. We're kind of, you know, manually actually displaying them in the UI here. So we have green square, you know, camera A, you know, we're kind of displaying some of them and some of their properties here. But what I want to be doing, obviously, is having like an actual hierarchy where we can list out all of the entities that are currently in our scene. So we need to actually iterate through our whole entity component system and retrieve all of the entities. Once we've done that, we can make them like, you know, selectable and all of that stuff so that you can maybe see their properties and their components in another kind of properties or inspector panel, something like that. And then we can also make it so that we can add entities, remove entities, add components, remove components, all of that stuff. So lots of UI work that has to be done in order for us to actually be able to make a scene inside Hazelnut. So let's start by going over to Hazelnut. So Hazelnut is the level editor, right? So this stuff is you know, all the level editor kind of stuff. And let me just show all files here. All of the level editor stuff has to be in here. So I'm going to call this editor, even though the whole thing is an editor. And then inside here, oh, actually, you know what? Let's call this panels. Panels. So I've made a folder called panels, and inside there, I'm going to make a panel here called scene hierarchy panel. Scene hierarchy panel.h and also .cpp. All right, we'll include the PCH. Actually, are we compiling all this with a PCH? We're not compiling this with a PCH. Okay, we'll ignore that for now. We should probably write a PCH for Hazelnut as well. We'll still have this as Hazel's namespace, and then we'll call this the scene hierarchy panel, of course. Include scene hierarchy panel. Okay, so the premise here, as I mentioned, is quite simple. And let me zoom in maybe, because I know people want that. Namespace Hazel. The premise for this is quite simple, and we are going to be referring to Hazel Dev, where I've already have had a scene hierarchy panel for probably around a year. So that's nice. ImGui is what I wanted to include. So where is ImGui? I think we can just include it like that. All right, so the way that I like to set up the scene hierarchy panel essentially is I like to have it actually take a ref of a scene. Now, whether or not it should actually take the ref, so in other words, keep it alive or not, that's potentially debatable, but overall, when you create a scene hierarchy panel, you should make it take in a ref, and additionally, you should probably have a set context function that actually sets the context. So in other words, the context, of course, is the scene, because that's the context of the scene hierarchy panel. It's displaying the hierarchy of a particular scene. So we need to actually have this here, and again, I am going to have this as like a, we'll call it context. I will have this as a ref, as a strong ref, meaning that, you know, if the scene gets deleted, then potentially the scene hierarchy panel could still retain it. We'll include Hazel scene, which should also include ref, of course. And, or will it? I mean, it has, oh no, I forgot that we're not intrusive ref counting just yet. So we'll also need to include like core base, I think. Okay, so we've got all that now. We have set context, and then we also want to add probably a lot of functions here, such as set selected, so that way we can actually programmatically select an entity. That's useful for, you know, if, for example, if we clicked somewhere in the scene to actually mouse pick an entity, we would want the panel to reflect the fact that it's selected now, and all that stuff. We're not going to bother with that. Again, you know, doing some simple stuff here. The real big thing that we do need, though, is something called on ImGui render, obviously, because that is what's actually going to render our panel. So let's go ahead and implement this stuff. Yeah, let's implement all of these. I'll implement set context is for now probably just going to be a setter, but in the future, I may actually, and let's call this context, I may actually have it do more, because it's possible that we need to update something, and, you know, so that's why I implemented it in the CPP file. And yeah, we'll also call set context here with the context. Okay, so ImGui render, we'll do ImGui begin. This is going to be our scene hierarchy. ImGui end. And then we can start drawing basically like this whole tree. Now, as I mentioned, I have done this in Hazel Dev, so it's going to be a lot easier to just, you know, use that. So the way that I actually set this up here was I used ent, of course, to iterate through everything. So what we'll do is we'll say friend class scene, so that we can actually let scene access all of our private stuff, except actually, I just realized that this is going to be a little bit different. We're actually going to go to scene, and we're going to do friend class scene hierarchy panel. So that's going to allow us to access all of this stuff. I don't think scene needs to access this. And so what this should let us do is hopefully inside context, we can now access the registry, and we can actually iterate through everything inside our registry by just using each. So this lets us submit a lambda here. And we're going to, I think it takes in we'll just do auto entity, which is going to be that entity identifier. And then this is going to iterate through every single entity in our registry. So just to make sure that this works, you know, we can just kind of just use ImGui text here and actually maybe get like the tag component from the entity and print that. So let's try that. So let's just do mcontext mregistry, and then we'll do get. Yeah, sure, we'll do get, and then get's what I'm thinking of, right? And then maybe tag component, and then entity. So that should give us our tag, or the tag component, TC. And then we can just do, let's just do S, and then we'll do tc.tag. All right, so if we basically create a scene hierarchy panel and then iterate, and then call on ImGui render, we should be able to, from our editor layer, we should be able to actually see all of our entities already. So let's just do include scene hierarchy panel. I don't know, we'll do like panels down here maybe. We'll make a ref from it, scene hierarchy panel. I mean, we don't have to make a ref from it, but I will just so that we can control it. No, I'm not going to. Let's just do scene hierarchy panel like that. I'm not going to make a ref out of it. Scene hierarchy panel, and then we're going to make another constructor here that actually just doesn't do anything, so that we don't have to actually have a constructor that sets the context. So that way that will be fine. And then inside editor layer, we can actually maybe inside on attach, you know, maybe at the bottom even, I'll just say m scene hierarchy m panel, m scene hierarchy panel. Dot set context to active scene. Okay, so now we have a context, and now we just need to render everything. So inside on ImGui render, inside our doc panel, of course, we've got settings over here, which is kind of the big one. We're going to eventually get rid of that. So over here, I will do on ImGui render. So this is us actually rendering our scene hierarchy panel. Let's hit F5 and see what we get. So we should see a list of entities, hopefully, or a build error. You know, that's also cool. I just spilled quite a bit of water. Never mind. References must be initialized. All right, I clearly didn't do this right. Can we not just use get with this? I mean, I guess we could. You know what? Let's make this into an actual Hazel entity. I'll call this entity ID. So entity equals, we don't need to really use equals. And then the scene being context raw. The reason I want to do this is because we're obviously going to be doing a lot of stuff with the entity, not just this. And so we might as well use our own API for it, just because it cleans things up a bit. So this now just becomes entity get component, like that. And yeah, let's check this out. Still doesn't work. All right, context is an undeclared identifier. All right, we need to capture that. Let's just capture it by, well, we'll capture it by reference. We could capture it by value, doesn't really matter. Entity uses undefined class. Oh, okay. We need to include some stuff. Let's include it up here because we will actually need it up here. Because eventually we're going to keep track of the currently selected entity so that we can properly display our inspector. And so I might as well include it in the header file now. All right, lots of problems. What's going on? So context.raw is not a thing, really. Raw is not a member of shared pointer scene. Oh, sorry, it's not raw, it's get. I'm just used to my own intrusive like reference counting refs and stuff. Tag component, I think, is an include that we should have. Include Hazel scene components. HZ core error identifier not found. Where is this stuff stored? In core base. And what are we trying to compile here? Entity.h. That's a bit odd, isn't it? Because I definitely included base here. And maybe we need enable asserts turned on. Yeah, we probably need to actually make sure that HZ debug is enabled here. Otherwise, I guess we won't get asserts. So let's, this is something that we actually need to do inside pre-make for hazelnut, which is now moved here, I believe. So this is hazelnut, right? No, actually we do define debug. Huh, that's odd. I thought maybe we didn't. So then why is this stuff not... Actually, that doesn't make any sense anyway, because if it wasn't, it just wouldn't compile to anything. But it just can't find HZ core error. So where is HZ core error defined? HZ core error. It's inside, oh, it's inside log. Okay, that makes sense. So let's go back to maybe here, and let's include log. I probably should have just included hazel.h, but I wanted to be clever. All right, that's better. Let's hit F5, and hopefully we should now run. Oh, almost, very close. Couldn't find that, because that, of course, we put into panels. And here we go. I think this is it. I think we're finally ready to see this. All right, awesome. There it is. Isn't it beautiful? Oh, it's a disaster. Yeah, I forgot to convert it into a const char pointer. So let's go back out here, and tc.tag.cstring is what we want, because ImGui wants an actual pointer to some data. Pointer to some characters, not necessarily a string, an std string. All right, check this out. So we now have our scene hierarchy panel. Let's put it up here. Settings. You know, let's just put this over here for now. And I will commit this imgui.ini file, so if you pull, you should kind of get the same layout. So over here we have clip space entity, camera entity, and green square, right? We can now list all of the entities in our scene. How cool is that? Let's close this, and then let's extend this a little bit to make it better. So what I want to do next is basically say that well, the first thing that we should probably do is somehow validate whether or not this entity is valid, because we don't necessarily want to display maybe all entities in our scene. We don't really have a good way of doing this yet. Potentially we could look at whether or not the entity has a certain component, such as like an ID component in the future, or maybe even a tag component. If it doesn't have a tag component, that's a bit suspicious. Maybe it's some kind of Hazel internal entity, because as you know, whenever we create an entity, we always give it a tag component, right? I mean, we always give it a transform component. Debatable whether or not we need that, probably not, but we always give it a tag component. That's just how it works. But I'm not gonna bother with that. So instead, what we're going to do is do draw entity node entity, right? So at this point, what I'm doing is I'm gonna make a new function here. It's going to be private, but I'm gonna make a special section for private functions. We'll call this void draw entity node. And then this is going to take in a Hazel entity, just by value like that. Okay, so this draw entity node function is going to, first of all, well, it's going to at least do this, right? But now we're going to actually see, hopefully, the entity node. And the entity node specifically is going to hopefully, well, it's going to do a number of things. The biggest thing that we want it to actually do is have a selectable list of entities. And that's what we're going to work on today. So the way that I did this inside Hazel Dev was I used something called, well, the ImGui tree nodes. One thing I want to recommend here, because I'm not going to like re-implement this whole thing, I'm probably just going to copy and paste some of the code that I've got here and then explain it and walk you guys through it, because it probably took me like an hour to work out. But the way that I like to deal with ImGui is you'll see that included with Hazel is this ImGui demo.cpp file, which is provided by ImGui. I specifically didn't delete this file because it's very useful. We have about 5,000 lines almost of ImGui demo code. So this is code on how you can use ImGui. Anywhere in your whole project, well, specifically in like the ImGui section, you can literally just drop one of these ImGui show demo windows like that. Done, right? If you write this code, it's going to display the demo window. You can now see the demo window, right? Here it is, the ImGui demo, and you can browse it and you can find something that you want. Like for example, oh, look at this. Look at these like kind of header things, and it looks like some kind of parented list that looks almost like a scene hierarchy. Well, guess what? You can actually find this code inside that ImGui demo.cpp file and see how they did it, because obviously this is built using ImGui. And it, you know, it goes to show for like this, for example, you know, oh cool, you can make an image pop up that just displays stuff. You know, you can find that code inside that demo thing, combo boxes, That's obviously something that's useful. Text input, multi-line text input. Maybe you want to make like a little code editor. Be a bit annoying doing it this way, but I guess it's possible. Different data types, color pickers. Oh, I want to have a color picker that looks like this right here. You can find all of that stuff, right? This is the number one thing that I consult whenever I have to do something with ImGui. For sure, it is this ImGui demo window because it's so useful. Okay, so that's basically the short story of how I worked out how to do all of this stuff. But luckily for you, I've already worked out how to do all this stuff, so I don't have to waste too much time. Instead, we're going to try, well, actually, I might type this out because there's a lot of stuff going on in Hazel Dev that we don't necessarily want. So for each entity node, we want to get the tag component and we want to see what it is. Now, it is possible to have a tag component that is empty, as you know, and in fact, maybe it's not, because I think what we ended up doing is we just called it entity. So we can have an entity called entity, right? I think I may have called it unnamed entity in Hazel Dev, but ultimately we have a name here, right? It's TC. And in fact, we can just take tc.tag, and that way we just have tag, right? Ready to go. This is going to be a string. Now I'm taking it as not a const reference because we're also going to eventually make it possible to edit the name, but that'll probably be done using the inspector panel or the properties panel instead of the actual scene hierarchy panel, of course. All right, so once we have the tag, what I'm going to do is basically call something called ImGui tree node EX. And ImGui tree node EX is going to, this is what is that tree node that you saw there, right? We actually need to supply some flags to it as well. But the overload that we'll use is one that takes in a pointer ID, because what I'm actually going to do is ImGui needs a unique ID to actually identify this tree node, right? That's how ImGui works. It needs like unique identifiers for pretty much every component so that it can then respond to input and do certain things with them. So what we're going to actually do is take the entity, right? This is a little bit dodgy because this uint32t pointer, or rather, sorry, this uint32t is a 32-bit entity ID, but this void pointer is it's going to be 64 bits on a 64-bit platform. So I'm actually having second thoughts about this. But what we could do is just get the actual ent ID. Actually, I think we can. Did we add a cast for that? No, we didn't. I thought we may have. I don't really want to take the memory address of this either. I was just going to use the ent. Yeah, let's do this. Okay. So what we'll do is we'll write operator uint32t, because that's what the entity ID is. ID type, I think ID type is always going to be a 32-bit one. I don't think they do 64-bit at all. So what we'll do is we'll add an operator for this that just returns the entity handle as a uint32t, like this. So this is just like, instead of us actually having to write, a function called getID, we can just add a cast operator like that. So that now we can just cast our entity to a uint32t, but then I'm going to cast that to a 64t. I don't know if that's necessary actually, but it sounds like it. I mean, it probably isn't, right? Because if I'm casting this to a void pointer, and this is not like a pointer-to-pointer cast, maybe this isn't necessary, but ultimately, I don't even know. Ultimately, what this is doing is ImGui tree node EX takes a pointer, right? It just takes a void pointer, I think. Might not. Yeah, it takes a void pointer. Now, it's a void pointer, but essentially a pointer is just an integer, and what we need to provide it with is a unique identifier for this tree node, for this actual tree node, right? And so what we're doing is we're using the entity's ID to serve as the identifier for this tree node, like UI component. And obviously that is a good thing to do. Like obviously that will work because entities are all unique. You'll never have the same entity twice in this scene hierarchy panel. So that's all great. But the problem is that I'm not really sure how this stuff works because, obviously this entity ID is a 32-bit value, whereas maybe if we cast into a 64-bit value, it could mess some stuff up. But to be honest, I'm not 100% sure if, chat seems to be saying that it is necessary. So we'll leave it here. We'll still cast this to a 64t, which will just basically convert that into a 64-bit integer. And then that we're basically saying is like, whatever, use it as a void pointer. Because obviously we're never going to be using the address of this void pointer. It's just using it as a value. I mean, this function could have taken in an int or a 64-bit int, but it takes in a void pointer. All right, sorry, long explanation probably, but I just wanted that to be clear. We're going to take in something called flags, and then I guess I'll use tag.cstring as the name, right? So this const char format thing here is the actual name of the node, right? So that's the actual label that will show up, and it gives it to you as like a format with variable arguments, so you can basically use it like printf or any of the other functions if you want to like display a number and format your string essentially. All right, flags. So we need ImGui tree node flags. Now this has a bunch of different flags, and the ones that we're going to use is basically, as I mentioned, we want to be able to both expand these, because in the future, we're going to, so what is it? It's open on arrow. So we want to be able to actually expand them, because we'll have parented entities, and we want to be able to expand and collapse those groups. Open on arrow is a flag that just means that you have to click on the actual arrow that will show up if you want to expand it, instead of on the whole row, because we want to obviously be able to click on the row to select an entity, and that's what we'll also do here. So basically, we have the option to also add another flag, and these are just bit flags, so you can order them together, called ImGui tree node flags selected, I think. If you add this flag, it will show up as selected, right? So if we add that here, they'll all look like they're selected. So what we actually want to do is keep track of the currently selected entity. Well, that's pretty easy, because every entity has a unique ID. So what we can actually do is say entity m selection context, and all you can select our entities, so it's not that difficult. So this should just have a null entity to begin with, and we can say that if selection context equals entity, I don't know if we can compare them like this, but we definitely need to be able to, then we can include this, otherwise just 0, right? And then we'll OR that together with the open arrow, because we want that for every single thing, okay? But this is just for selected stuff. All right, we don't have a way to compare entities, which is great. So let's add that in here. Let's do operator, rather this will be a bool operator equals const. So what we need to do here, return entity handle equals const entity other. Entity handle equals other dot entity handle, and mscene equals other dot mscene. So the pointers have to be the same and the IDs have to be the same. And that's our operator equals, and then operator does not equal. We'll basically just return, we could call this a number of ways. We could just do return operator equals other, and then return that. Okay, or you can also do return this equals other. I don't think you need the parentheses. I don't know, I guess maybe this one looks cleaner. You are dereferencing this, and that might look weird, but this is clearly you. Okay, I'll just return this, sorry. It'll be, you do need this. It'll be the opposite of that. So that, all right, we'll leave it as that. I don't know what's better, to be honest. In terms of what looks better. So now this should work, obviously, there you go. And now we can tell what the selected entity is. I mean, we can't select them yet, but obviously in this case, nothing will be selected because we don't have a selection context. So here's the thing though, we're now drawing our node. So the next thing we want to do is actually respond to it being clicked. So we can do if ImGui is item clicked, right? So if the previous item, which is the tree node, gets clicked, then we want to set the selection context equal to entity. And then in Hazel Dev, I also have like a selection changed callback, but we're not going to deal with that right now. Okay, then we have some pop-up menus, which we'll ignore. And then this stuff is also stupid. And then I think that's pretty much it. Oh, right. So this actually returns whether or not the tree node has been expanded. And obviously, if it has been expanded, we want to, basically continue recursively going down that tree and expand everything. Well, not necessarily expand everything, but you know, if this entity has any child entities, we want to display that. We don't have any concept of child entities just yet. So this is easy. All we need to do is say that if it has been opened, let's just call tree pop, and that's it. Okay, that's it. That's it. Now we should have essentially selectable entities. That's pretty cool. Let's hit F5. That's actually not that bad. It looks a lot more scary in Hazel Dev, but it's really not that bad when you cut out all of the other extra stuff. I mean, we don't know if it works yet, but okay, so we have these clip space entities. Look at this. I can select them, right? So you can see that if I click on them, they stay selected, right? And I can expand them. Now, expanding them currently does nothing, but like, you know, you could easily do another one of these here. I'll just do this as a demo. So let's do the same thing as a test, except this time I'll do entity plus 1,000. Please ignore what I'm doing. I'm just ruining everything, but I have to. Otherwise, it's going to be the same idea and it's going to mess stuff up. What did I do wrong here? What did I even want to do? What? That looks right to me. Oh, no, of course. Well. Oh, this was a mistake. Okay. Change of plans. We're gonna give this one a stupid ID. All right, that's gonna be the same for. Anyway, it doesn't matter. This is just a test. Stop it. So flags, and then it doesn't even matter. We'll just remove the selected flag because we're not gonna be able to select it. All right. So this is just an example to prove that the expanding stuff works. So if we take a look at this, then you can see that if I press the arrow, we have this clip space entity here, right? It's not going to go any further, but we can expand all of these. They look nice. And we are going to clean up the styling of this. Like, we're not going to use this font, and we're going to probably make stuff a bit bigger, maybe. And like, just the way that this looks, it looks a lot prettier, obviously in Hazel Dev, different colors as well. But the main kind of, you know, component is here, right? And we now have a way to select this. So the cool thing is that we can now reflect this selection and display all of the components of the currently selected entity in another panel. And I think that is what we'll do next time. So, hope you guys enjoyed this video. Let me find my right overlay. If you have any questions, don't forget to leave them in the comment section below. Next time, as I mentioned, we're going to take a look at creating that inspector panel. I don't know. Let me know what you guys want. Do you want the properties panel? Do you want the inspector panel next time? Okay, my point is, it's the same panel. Sorry, I got started by chat. It's the same panel. We need to call it either the inspector panel or the properties panel. I think I called it properties inside Hazel Dev. If you have any other suggestions, I know it's frequently called something like inspector in Unity. If you have a name suggestion, definitely leave that in the comment section below. And yeah, I will see you guys next time. Don't forget to hit the like button and patreon.com/thecherno if you want to help support this series, everything I'm doing here on YouTube and otherwise. You'll get access to Hazel Dev, which is where a lot of this code already is implemented and a lot of that code came from. And what else? And, you know, there's some other things like live stream recordings and, you know, much, much more. Actually, no, that's about it. Thank you guys for watching. I'll see you next time. Goodbye.